You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Cimino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer. Hey everybody, welcome to August 13th, 2025. The only podcast that has negotiated a 0% export rate. Well done, gentlemen.
Excellent.
Well done.
Yeah, we're not going to be extorted.
No. I mean, I will gladly give anybody 15% of the revenue we generate. No, wait, that's not.
Absolutely.
No. Anyway, let's start off with a little company called Zoox. They make a adorable little car that looks like it came out of a Pixar movie. But it has no steering wheel, no pedals, things like that. And they've been trying to pull a fast one on NHTSA for a while. And with a new administration and enough donations, political donations, you can get whatever the hell you want in this new world. And so NHTSA has said, all right, we'll give you an exemption. And you don't need steering wheels and pedals. And you can go ahead and get out there in the world.
So who is Zoox owned by?
This guy who's addicted to human growth hormone, Jeff Bezos.
So he owns some other companies too, doesn't he?
Yes. I don't know which ones though. I've never heard of them. They're pretty obscure. Anyway, this article in MSN, it talks about the revised process to fast track these things. Quoting, the revised process involves an expedited application that allows companies like Zoox to receive exemptions for testing and demonstrations, and eventually commercial operations. So previously, you get to self-certify, right? Is that true, Michael? Now they get to self-certify and be like, ha, fuck you. Like, what?
Yeah, well, like Zoox actually tried that. I mean, this all kind of came out of an investigation that's opened in 2023 where Zoox basically put out statements saying, we're certified to the FMVSS with this new vehicle, with no steering wheel, with no pedals, and with a lot of other issues with certification. And NHTSA kind of said, "What? how do you certify a vehicle with no steering wheel, no pedals, with different windows, seating configurations?" There were a lot of issues. So they said, we're going to open up an investigation. And basically, Zoox was trying to bullshit its way through certification. NHTSA called them on it. And then, miraculously, 2.5 years later, here we sit, and NHTSA has given them an exemption as an American manufacturer under a provision that was never intended to do this kind of thing.
Lovely. This vehicle doesn't even have side view mirrors. Do we know if it has a big red stop button inside for when it eventually goes rogue?
I don't know about the stop button. What I do know is that there were, I think, probably a dozen areas. NHTSA actually sent a team out to inspect them and to take a look at the vehicles. Zoox hosted them for an inspection. And, there were problems with the windows. They were using the wrong types of glass on certain windows, which is an egress issue that we've discussed a number of times. There's some issues with their occupant crash protection. I mean, the vehicle is built to go forward and backwards. And so there's some interesting things going on there. What's the front of the vehicle? What's the rear? There were some lamp issues, windshield issues, brake system, visibility concerns.
Well, Michael, weren't there also seatbelt issues? You got rear-facing passengers.
Yep.
And there's no certification standard for rear-facing passengers, is there?
There are some provisions for it, because I think most of us, at least Anthony and I, probably remember the big station wagons that had the rear seat in the back.
Way back.
Yeah. Those were fun to ride in, but they had a lot of just to keep it short, they had a lot of certification issues. And so essentially, rather than go through, there's basically two processes now that NHTSA has announced they're going to be using. One is specifically for American manufacturers. They're really trying to push the Patriot drumbeat here on American-made autonomous vehicles. And so they're allowing them to come in under this provision that I will probably discuss later in Gaslight that doesn't really apply to autonomous vehicle fleets. And they just swept it right through. There's no safety requirement that they make a statement of, or demonstrate, how are they rectifying the conflicts with the federal motor vehicle safety standards before they put this thing on the road. There's no ability for the public to have any input here. If a company comes in and does what was supposed to be the way manufacturers get these things out there, which is Part 55, a temporary exemption, they have to show and put on the record for public comment before a decision by the agency how they're rectifying the conflicts with the federal motor vehicle safety standards. So this other process that has kind of been created out of thin air from a bad interpretation of the regulations, essentially allows the Secretary of Transportation to say, I want that guy to get an exemption for his vehicles, and they don't have to show us anything.
How much does that cost? How much do I have to donate? Because for Ed and I, we have our AV company in Florida.
Right.
We just got to know what does it cost us to get that exemption?
I would buy a major newspaper and make its political reporting go a certain way, maybe donate to an inaugural fund here or there, those kind of things,
Okay. That sounds about right to me.
But this is, I've never seen a NHTSA investigation essentially turned on its head and become, this is an issue where we thought Zoox should be fined. They should be facing civil penalties for essentially a bullshit certification to the federal motor vehicle safety standards. These vehicles could not be certified. They were claiming that they were certified and putting them out on the roads for testing. And the investigation basically, says, we're closing the investigation because now we're giving them a full clean bill of health and they can go do whatever they want with these vehicles. So really odd fact pattern there. It's not something we've ever really seen as a result of its investigation. And I'm not sure how happy actually the folks conducting the investigation are with this decision, because, I think their concerns are safety. And this is one of those decisions that I think pretty clearly is coming from the top down at the DOT. So it's concerning. I guess the only bright spot here is that it's not going to allow for commercialization. Like, you can't get this simple, stupid political exemption for your company and then go out and commercialize your fleet and scale and all that stuff. You can.
Are you taking bets on that? Are you taking bets on that?
Yeah, I mean that's no, I'm not taking bets on that, because the way they use this provision from the start has been a little dishonest from a legal standpoint. And it's, I'm not taking bets on that, but the way the law reads, if you want to commercialize a vehicle, you have to use the Part 55 temporary exemption, and you have to make a public showing of safety, and the opportunity for the public to comment before the NHTSA administrator makes a decision is written into the code. So that one's harder to get around. This provision that they used is, one sentence, very general, wishy-washy with no standards, which is why they're using it, because it's easy to slip things through it and pretend that that's what it was intended to do. So,
well, Michael, yeah, I think you've become a conservative, Michael. You're relying on standards of the past that have no relevance.
I'm a law and order conservative, huh?
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, that's interesting, since the conservative wing of government seems to become socialist and meddling with every company they can these days. So it's an interesting juxtaposition we find ourselves in.
So back to the script. You keep saying Part 55, but correct me if I'm wrong. It's Part 555, right?
Part 555.
Okay, just checking for those playing the home game. Hey, let's jump into the next story. You guys remember there was a company? It was. I think we've barely ever touched on this issue. There's a company called Cruise. You guys remember this sound vaguely familiar?
Yeah, I remember the end of the cruise when they had an abrupt landing.
Yeah. So this company, just to remind people who are new to the show, GM had a subsidiary called GM Cruise, where it was an experiment for General Motors to see if they could light about $10 billion on fire and get nothing for it. And so what they did is they had these self-driving cars that they hired a guy who ran a video game company to to run, and they eventually drove over a pedestrian, dragged them, and then lied about it to investigators. So a bunch of people got fired. The kid behind the video games, he got to resign, which is always lovely. But now GM wants to bring this back. They're like, we're going to bring Cruise back. And from an article, which sadly we can't link to because it's pay linked, Bloomberg, I'm going to quote, "This time around, the project would be focused on autonomous cars for personal use rather than a robotaxi service. The first step is development of hands-free, eyes-free driving with a human in the vehicle, with the ultimate goal being a car that can drive with no one at the wheel." I think this might be my gaslight of the week because this, again, is just absurd. And the person they have running the project is someone that GM recently hired who 10 years ago worked on autopilot for Tesla. And we know autopilot is garbage. And recently he was at a self-driving trucking company called Aurora, which put, self-driving semis on the road that their only customer quickly said, "We're going to put a human back in the car." So yeah, I guess if you're not paying attention and you're a corporation that has no problem setting tens of billions of dollars on fire, this is the guy you hire.
What could possibly go wrong?
I think everything. I think
Yeah.
Mary Barrett will, within the next, I give her 12 months before shareholders go, "Wait, you did what with our money? And you did it twice?" But
I'm looking at this a slightly different way, I guess.
okay.
They're not going back to a Cruise robo-taxi running around the city like they were before autonomously. They are starting at level 3 here, and they're focusing on, first of all, General Motors actually uses, mapping to determine whether the roads they're on are appropriate for the vehicles that are on them, versus what Tesla did, right?
They do that with their Super Cruise.
Super Cruise, which is what
they're
this
doing
is.
here.
See, this is what this is. What they're saying here is the first step is the development of this hands-free, eyes-free driving with a human in the vehicle. That's what they're doing right now with Super Cruise, Ultra Cruise. It's had a number of different types of names as these things get rebranded, but they're saying ultimately we want to reach a point where there's nobody behind the wheel. When that is, Lord only knows. We know right now that an autonomous vehicle is going to cost way more than the consumer market can bear. So most people are not going to be able to afford a driverless car, even if a safe one existed and could be operated in all the areas that humans drive in. But second, I just see this as kind of puffery, saying, we're back in the autonomy game. We had a bad run with Cruise. We're back in it, just to kind of help attract investment and that sort of thing. But at the same time, they're being pretty clear that we're not putting vehicles out on the road without a driver there. There's going to be a safety driver in the vehicle for the foreseeable future. So I guess it's more of it's just kind of one of these. We see a lot of companies doing this. I think there's, Lyft and all these companies around autonomy always seem like they want to keep their foot in the door, whether or not they're doing significant work in the area.
Right.
Well, they seem to think that there's a growth path from level 3 operations to level 4 operations. I don't think there is, because the requirements for level 3 and the requirements for level 4 are quite different. And if I were in charge of engineering there, I would really look into that and lean into that very hard to say, are you building a foundation for eventual level 4? Are you setting up the requirements broadly enough so that we can grow from one to the other? Because if you're only focusing on level 3, you're pushing this development into a dead end.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, part of their push right now is to rehire some former cruise employees, which gives me pause because these former employees, directly responsible or not, were part of the problem. You worked for an organization that was poorly run, did dangerous things, and hey, looks like you might get your old job back. So keep quiet and keep marching. But that's me. This is my long-winded gaslight. It's just I have other options out in the world, but I think it'd be great if GM made a decent car. Maybe do that.
Anytime Cruz or Kyle or GM comes into play on this podcast, I think your ears perk up a little.
Yeah, it's
we into gaslight now?
Yeah, you can gaslight it up, Fred. You want to gaslight it?
Depends on who's going to win this week. Do we know that already, or do we have to wait for the actual
I feel despondent, so I mean, depends how much you guys suck, if I win or not.
Well, I'm going back to my old friends at Waymo.
Well, you got
in particular the Waymo One application, the Waymo One app, which is what you download onto your phone if you want to ride on a Waymo. Seems like a privilege. So I downloaded it and I looked it over to see what was in there. Didn't complete the whole process because very few autonomous Waymo Ones are available here in the hills of Western Massachusetts. But nevertheless, I was curious to find how much of a warning they give to people about the liability they assume when they go on their happily way with the Waymo. So I went to the Waymo website, and when they're talking about Waymo in Los Angeles, it's very interesting because they quote somebody named Eva, who says that she really loves using it because it is economical, it's safe and private, and it's sustainable. It says it provides convenience, prioritizes safety, and is committed to sustainability. Makes it by far my favorite mode of transportation, says Eva. Now, Eva is not credentialed in this particular publication. She looks like a typical human being, but who knows what AVs are doing these days. And but the point of this is that when you look a little deeper into it, what you find is that there is no notification on there that you are assuming liability for anything the Waymo does. And if you look further at the Waymo websites, it talks about limitation of liability and states that to the fullest extent permitted by applicable law, Waymo and the other Waymo parties will not be liable to you under any theory of liability, even if Waymo or the other Waymo parties have been advised of the possibility of such damages. The total liability of Waymo and the other Waymo parties for any claim arising out of or relating to these terms of our services, regardless of the form of the action, is limited to the amount paid, if any, by you to use our services. So, Michael, as I read that, basically it says if you are renting a Waymo, anything that happens in that is on you. It's not on Waymo. They've completely indemnified themselves, their officers, and stakeholders. Assuming that is my correct interpretation of what this plain English says, you would think that they would warn people who are using the services that, hey, you are assuming debt that could crush your life. You are assuming liability that could ruin your life for the sake of taking that taxi down to the local train station. But there is no such warning on the Waymo One website, and they blithely go on using references like good old Eva to say it's really wonderful, and that's all you need to know. So just sign up here. So that's my gaslight nominee for this week, the Waymo One application, which exposes you to unlimited liability for the Waymo going out of control and causing damages without giving you warning that that is what you are assuming by using the service.
That's pretty good, Fred. I mean, you're going to get points, but it's not for what you think. You're going to get points for Eva looks like a normal human. I mean,
Well, she does have that aspect in the picture.
so Michael, before you jump into yours, can we follow up? Is Fred's interpretation of the law correct? Do you assume full liability getting inside a Waymo?
I mean, whether or not the text makes them think that they're, I don't think they can do that, right? I mean, if something happens in that vehicle, it's going to be really hard for any court to hold you liable when you had absolutely no control over the vehicle's operation. As much as Waymo would like to sign away liability, I don't think that's going to work.
But I imagine you sign up for forced arbitration.
And that's going to be where the real issue is. Are you may not be liable for damages that occur in the crash, but are you even going to be able to get your case into court? If even if you hit someone who is also signed up on the Waymo app and they've already signed the terms of service, did they somehow sign away their right to go to court? We're not sure. That argument could be made, and it probably would be made.
So you should, before you get into a Waymo, I assume you should have, you should only travel with an attorney, and you should have assets at least in the 8-figure range. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, just for your information, in Section 9, indemnification, they say to the full extent permitted by applicable law, you will indemnify, defend, and hold harmless Waymo and its affiliates, officers, directors, agents, partners, and employees, individually and collectively, from and against any loss, liability, claim, demand, damages, expenses, or costs arising out of or related to your access to or use of our services.
Yep. I would say good luck to Waymo trying to get that to fly in an actual court. In arbitration, who knows?
Yeah,
depends how much they're paying the arbitrators.
But let's pretend the average consumer who gets this service manages to get into court. They're going to need really deep pockets to fight this, right? Or you're going to have to find some law firm that will be like, I'll take this on contingency. But they're going to be like other, class action firms. They're going to be like, are there 800 other cases that I can bundle together?
Well, I mean, I think in practice is where you probably, the language says one thing. In practice, we know there have been incidents where I think there was the Doring incident with the cyclist recently. Didn't Waymo cover the damages that were alleged? Even though a person in the vehicle opened the door, technically under California law, they would be liable. So I don't know, maybe, the lawyers might have drafted that in the terms of service, but when it comes to the ultimate decisions in cases where problems have occurred, Waymo has kind of backed its vehicles and not gone after the consumer.
Well, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that Tesla is probably a good example of a company that would probably tend the other way. We've seen how much they like to blame the human in any time it's opportune for them to do so, they will blame the human and try to shield themselves from liability. I don't know. I guess I'm saying I would trust Waymo more than Tesla marginally in that area, but it's certainly interesting. And this is one of those things that's going to have to play out in the law and across all 50 states as autonomous vehicles make their way across the country. It's one of those things that we just don't know the answer to right now because the laws haven't been written to account for computers driving vehicles.
Right. So, hey, listeners, if you've got 8 figures in your bank account, why don't you go to autosafety.org and click donate? If you don't have 8 figures, all of us do. You just it matters where you put the decimal place, right? Yeah. Anyway, autosafety.org, click on donate, do it once, do it thrice. I don't know why I do that. Anyway, Michael, you ready for your gaslight?
I am. I'm going back to that Zoox exemption. So, and the reason for that is I'm going to go to the provision that the DOT and NHTSA are using for this. It's 49 U.S. Code Section 30114.
Yeah, we knew that.
And I'll just read the provision. Vehicles used for a particular purposes is the title of the provision. And it says the Secretary of Transportation may exempt a motor vehicle or item of motor vehicle equipment from the certification section of the title on terms the secretary decides are necessary for research, investigations, demonstrations, training, competitive racing events, show, or display. First of all, and a major exemption I have, I mean, a major problem I have with this exemption is that this was written specifically for singular vehicles or items of equipment, right? It wasn't written to cover fleets of autonomous vehicles like Zoox has asked for an exemption for and been provided one. You know, it's pretty clear. It says the secretary may exempt a motor vehicle or item of motor vehicle equipment. It doesn't say anything about multiple vehicles, fleets, and it's restrictive in the way it says, you know, things that are necessary for research, investigation, demonstration. Typically, the research and investigation part of that would be, you know, NHTSA exempting a safety vehicle that's developed, which it did in the 70s and 80s, for actual research investigations, not a publicly traded company testing these vehicles on the road. So this provision was not written to apply to the situation that the DOT and NHTSA are applying it to here. And pretty simply, that's why they get my Gaslight of the Week, because they are taking a provision that was written for, you know, the Oscar Mayer hot dog mobile, for, you know, special racing cars, for things that just clearly aren't going to pass certification, but aren't going to be used broadly. And they're not going to impact motor vehicle safety because there aren't that many of them on the road. Here, they're giving an exemption to a fleet of autonomous vehicles. I think that clearly doesn't qualify as a special exemption. And for that reason, Secretary Duffy and the folks at NHTSA who backed this move, not all of them probably did, are going to get my Gaslight of the Week.
That's a pretty good one.
But
Okay.
I must take issue because I think that that's just a straight up example of corruption. Because according to the Simply Psychology Today website, it says gaslighting is a form of psychological abuse whereby a person or group manipulates one or more people into questioning their sanity and perception of reality.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
My perception of sanity and reality is that the secretary can only exempt one motor vehicle or piece of motor vehicle equipment for specific purposes. The secretary and the NHTSA are gaslighting me to believe that that's not true, and it's causing me it's afflicting me. So there we go.
Is it? Are you questioning your sanity and perception of reality, Michael? This is
more and more every day.
All right. I withdraw my objection.
Okay. Well, look, before I get to scoring, Fred, I think this is good for us because for our self-driving car business, I said we should make the car look like a giant hot dog. And now we can get an exemption for our fleet of self-driving hot dogs.
Well, excellent. I've got that done. I've got some in my driveway right now, but I'm having trouble getting a permit.
Hey, in Florida, everything's free.
Well, it's because in my version of the giant hot dog, people have to lie down. There are no seats, and
that's not getting past.
I've self-certified. Well, I self-certified, and I think that they're ready to go. But still, the problem exists.
Well, okay. Ready for the winner of this week's Gaslight? Are we ready?
Only if it's me.
No, it is Fred this week for saying
all right.
Eva resembles a human. That's it. That's it. If you, I like the leap you were taking trying to interpret the law without that background. It seemed like it was pretty good. And then you had to go to the dictionary and define gaslight, which smelled of desperate, a little desperate. But, for that, I'll let you win this week.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
He's ridiculous. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still wavering on the whether I is lying under a different name or whether it's really a different thing.
I don't know.
When you really dive into it philosophically, there's not really a big difference.
Well, have you read On Bullshit by Harry Frankfurt?
I have, to the extent that, especially because it's been covered a couple of times in the Tao of Fred.
It's all explained. All explained in that book.
Yeah, okay. That's your Piggly Wiggly. Speaking of gaslighting and bullshit, Lyft is betting on robotaxis to drive revenue growth. This is from the Wall Street Journal. And basically, it talks about how Lyft is like, hey, let's get autonomous vehicles. Let's join that cool group like Waymo and like all these people. The thing is, Lyft doesn't own their own cars. They're kind of like Uber. I mean, Lyft has some, I guess, that they own, but they're like Uber, where it's just you're an independent driver because you're not an employee because they'd have to pay a whole bunch of extra benefits and stuff and minimum wage. And then you rent a service through an app. And then as you as a customer, you go ahead, click, and you wait for the the Lyft to show up. And then when it's one block away, they cancel on you constantly. And anyway, I'm going to quote from this Wall Street Journal article because I think this really gets to the crux of their fantasy. Quoting, ride-sharing companies like Lyft will gain bargaining power over drivers as they step up usage of autonomous vehicles, allowing them to push down wages, said an equity analyst at Morningstar. That could help reduce costs for the companies, but they're also paying more to operate an autonomous fleet. But they don't have to deal with those goddamn people wanting healthcare. Yeah, so that's I think what's really the push here. But I think Lyft is fantasizing about.
Yeah, I mean, this is just another one. Yeah, they're fantasizing about how much they can make off these operations, as we've discussed ad nauseum in the past. But also these announcements like this, we're partnering with X, Y, and Z so we can pretend we're keeping our foot in the autonomy race. I mean, Lyft, I think, is really looking to be more of the platform that autonomous vehicle companies or people are using to ride autonomously versus building its own vehicle. So, in that respect, and Uber's doing very similar things while they're partnering with other folks. They're not building the vehicles anymore, or trying to, as they dip their toe into with Volvo when they, caused what is to this date the only level 4+ autonomous fatality in Arizona.
So let's move along, and we'll enter that section of the show that makes people get a little nauseous, a little upset, some people a little flushed. It's Tesla time. That's right. So, we've talked about how Tesla's released their robo-taxi in a very small section of Austin. And NHTSA sent some people down there to investigate these things because there's lots of footage of them doing illegal things, not making incorrect left turns, stopping in the middle of the street to let off passengers, just regular dumb stuff. And I'm going to quote from this article in Bloomberg. NHTSA didn't specify whether staff did, in fact, ride in Tesla's robotaxis last month. The agency said in another filing dated August 6th that it received Tesla's response to their July 1st emails last week and that the information is subject to request for confidential treatment. So basically, NHTSA sends some requests to Tesla to like, hey, give us this data about what your cars are doing. How many, one of the questions they ask is, how many cars are in this robotaxi fleet? Tesla events a response, but they're like, this is confidential. We can't share this with people. How can I do that with everything in my life?
Well, I mean, Tesla's been doing this for years with everything they've submitted to NHTSA requesting blanket confidentiality, which is one big reason why we have trouble, the public is being super slow played by Tesla, right? As far as the stream of information, NHTSA is being slow played by Tesla and has for some time now. I mean, last week we talked about how the data that they've submitted to and the responses they've submitted to NHTSA should be in question when you see what happened in that verdict in Florida over autopilot, the way that Tesla behaved there, if that's indicative of how they're behaving with, NHTSA. And we think there's some truth to that. In this situation, you see it right here. NHTSA sends Tesla an information request May 8th asking, what the hell's going on in Austin? Y'all are talking about it a lot on Twitter. We don't have anything on it. What's going on? And, it takes Tesla a month and a half plus just to give them some sort of response. But the response is so bad that then on July 1st, NHTSA has to write an email to Tesla, basically asking all of the same things that they were asking in their initial request in May. And since nobody in the public can see any of this because it's all confidential, claimed confidential by Tesla, we have no idea what's really going on. But all outward appearances are that Tesla is dragging its feet and providing information to NHTSA about the safety of the robotaxis operating in Austin. And NHTSA is trying their best to get information out of Tesla, writing them letters, writing them emails, scheduling meetings with them, and they're still not getting relevant information. So that's concerning. It's really concerning given Tesla's history and the fact that it just looks like Tesla wants it to bullshit its way through life and not actually cover all of its safety areas and make sure that that the vehicles and the processes and everything that's going on there ensures some sort of safety. So that's where we're at. I would call again for NHTSA to start using its authority to penalize Tesla when you give an incomplete response to the government when they're requesting this stuff. You know, it says right there in the letter they send to Tesla in May, you're subject to civil penalties for delay, for not providing full responses. It's pretty clear Tesla's not providing full responses based on just the email 2 months later in July asking the same questions that were in the first one. So this is just an area where NHTSA needs to really clamp down on Tesla. And you know what? The civil penalties aren't certainly going to really hamper Tesla financially, but they will certainly send a signal, and enough of them means you could probably call the DOJ and try to go after a more substantial penalty that's not provided for in that area. So it's frustrating to read these types of things and to see how Tesla's able to just stymie government investigations.
I think Michael's trying to gaslight us, thinking that we can go to the DOJ and have them investigate Tesla.
Well, occasionally what'll happen if there's a larger pattern of bad behavior on the part of an auto company, that's what happens.
And you think that would happen in this world?
NHTSA goes to no, not
there
with
you
Department
go.
Of Justice, but
Yeah,
that's technically how the process has played out in the past. But yes, I'm gaslighting our listeners, making them think that the Department of Justice is a Department of Justice.
So NHTSA sends these requests. Tesla writes back and says confidentiality. Is there any way for the public to be like bullshit and file a request against that? Be like,
yeah, you could file a FOIA request. However, you might as well go ahead and call a lawyer and put them on retainer because, first of all, you may or may not receive a response in the next year. NHTSA sometimes goes through these files and comes up with they redact the portions that are actually confidential and they make public the rest, but that usually takes them longer than it takes for the investigations to complete. Usually, it could be 2-3 years in the past. I'm not sure what the time lag is right now, but ultimately you're going to have to, go to court to get some of these documents made public. And that's super expensive. And it's something not everyone can afford to do. I think that, major media companies are some of the few folks who can afford to take on that kind of process and access this information. But at the federal level, the Freedom of Information Act is functionally broken. And it makes it very difficult and expensive to even think about acquiring confidential business information or information that's been claimed to be confidential business information.
Moving on to the next Tesla bit of nonsense. There's an article in CNBC and the title confuses me, and kind of the background of the article confuses me a little bit. It's titled, Tesla Robotaxi Scores Permit to Run Ride-Hailing Service in Texas. Now, I personally thought that's what they've been doing for the last month, but now they've been granted a permit to run a ride-hailing business in Texas. So now they can compete against Uber and Lyft. Oh, I guess previously it was invite only. It was
if they want to open it up to the public, they have to be certified as a transportation network company like Uber or Lyft would be.
Right. Further from the article, this is hilarious. The Austin fleet consists of Model Y vehicles equipped with Tesla's latest partially automated driving systems. I like how they say it's partially automated driving systems, but they're selling it as fully automated driving systems. Oy vey. Quoting, Musk, who has characterized himself as pathologically optimistic, said on Tesla's earning call last month that he believes Tesla could serve half of the U.S. population by the end of 2025 with autonomous ride-hailing services.
Oh
He left out the part where his goal with Doge is to kill off 90% of the U.S. population, so he can make that statement true. What is? Is there anything else to even add into this nonsense?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, Tesla got a permit to operate as a taxi company.
Right.
Which they're doing, since they have a driver in the vehicle and a driver sitting behind a remote monitor for every one of these cars. So you get 2 drivers for the price of 1.
Right. And fun Tesla news, the U.S. military has bought 2 Cybertrucks, not to drive around on, not to look for security failures, but to do what? Blow up.
Use it as targets.
Yeah, use it as targets, blow up, because they're saying the U.S. military is like, hey, it looks like some third world dictators might want to have these as their own little armored vehicles, and let's just see how well we can blow them up. I don't know what did our local third world dictator, did he get a Cybertruck, or does he go for a different one?
No, he's got a free airplane. He got a.
Oh man,
That's a better deal.
That is a better deal indeed.
He's a great deal maker, as we know.
All right, last Tesla story before we cry. There's something called Joe mode in a Tesla. Joe mode. I don't get it, but Joe mode, essentially what it does is it makes all the alarms, alerts, bells, whistles inside your car quieter. So like if you turn signal with that click, 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 click type thing, that'll become, I guess, and like beeps and boops and bops, because somebody named Joe was like, my car's too loud while I'm falling asleep, and letting it drive itself. Michael, you think this is not a legal thing?
It's questionable. I would, they're saying that it doesn't impact the safety features. However, they go ahead then to say, that it reduces the volume for the sounds coming from turn signals, parking sensors, seatbelt reminders, importantly, autopilot, and other general notifications. It doesn't seem to impact some of the ADAS features, the lane departure, automatic emergency braking, that type of thing. But there are certain sound thresholds you have to reach for warnings under the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, and what you're basically doing here is allowing people to put a kill switch on the volume to some of those things, which I would encourage NHTSA to take a look at this just to make sure that, for instance, you're not killing the seatbelt reminders, which are pretty effective in getting people to buckle up due to their annoyance. And also, if you're, we don't know what the full scope of this feature is. It's not clear from the article. We should probably look and see if we can figure that out and see if that's available on Tesla's website. But it seems shady. It seems like there could be some issues with Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, which require certain sound levels for some of these safety features.
Well, if any of our listeners were in the meeting in which people discussed which of these legal standards are important to sustain and which of them we can ignore, please give us a call or send us a note. We'd love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation.
Mm-hmm. There's also a hidden mode, another one called Joe Mama mode, where the car just yells at the other drivers around you that they're driving poorly and to keep their baby safe.
Right.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
It doesn't sound too bad. Hey, Fred, you ready to talk some more?
Sure. I love talking. I'm not very good at it, but I
stumbles
try.
out of his face. Okay, is this going to be something that the layman can understand?
Absolutely.
Are you going to keep it under 20 minutes?
I'm not sure about that, but
Okay.
we'll give it a whirl.
All right, the Tao of Fred.
All right. So this week, I wanted to talk about a report that came out that people have found a new way of breaking into your car by going through the tire pressure sensors that every car now has. So the way these tire pressure sensors work is that as the car moves due to the vibration, a very small amount of electric energy is produced inside the tire, inside the mechanism that reports the tire pressure. And that connects to, through a wireless connection, to the CAN bus that's inside of your car. Now, the CAN bus is Common Access Network, I think it stands for. And that's how all of the different electronic control units in the car communicate with each other. So that sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo. So I wanted to explain that in more prosaic terms. So let's consider the case of a pizza delivery. If you want a pizza, you call up, perhaps you'd call somebody and say, I'd like to get a pizza, and you order your pizza with specifications. And that pizza is like the data that's carried in a message to the CAN bus. So the CAN bus is kind of like the network that you see in apartment buildings where you've got a bunch of mailboxes and buzzers. And if you want to get in and talk to somebody, you push a buzzer, right?
Right.
So what the ECU does, the electronic control unit does, is like the delivery person who gets to the apartment building and they push a button, and the person ideally on the other end will be the right person, and they'll say, who is this? And they'll say, pizza. And they hit the door buzzer and it comes in. Okay, so that's kind of the way the CAN bus works. The data announces itself from one electronic control unit, and the CAN bus electronically says, okay, I'm going to transmit this information, like the person who is pushing the buzzer, to the CAN bus. And then if it's accepted, like the person opening the door, then the CAN bus allows the message to get carried through, and the data is delivered to the recipient. So it's like, the pizza delivery person goes up to the 10th floor, goes to apartment 1003, opens the door, delivers the pizza. Everybody's happy, you went to the right place at the right time. So what somebody has figured out is that the wireless link between your tires and the CAN bus in your car can be interrupted. It's like the pizza delivery person has been hijacked, and somebody gives them the wrong pizza, and that wrong pizza is going to be delivered to the address rather than the pizza that was being ordered.
This is like what I do in my buildings. Friday night, I just hang out by the front door, see delivery guys come by, and be like, yeah, that's for me. Yeah, that's
right.
me.
Open the door and take whatever they've got.
6G. Yeah,
because that works. Yeah. So it's kind of like that. So that's how this all works. And the problem, of course, is that it can break into the delivery service, and rather than you getting the pepperoni pizza you delivered, you end up getting a box full of, well, let's just say bullshit, because that's kind of what we talk about in this show. And that's not what you want. But the person who is delivering it, the person with a bad intent, has succeeded in putting that malware or that bad content into your apartment. And that's the whole point of this. Now, why is that important? Well, a lot of information about your car is traveling on that CAN bus. So brakes information, light information. If you have steering that is controlled electronically, the direction that you want to travel is carried on the CAN bus. So a lot of very critical information can be injected into the system and subvert the normal operation of the vehicle. Now, this is an intrinsic problem with the CAN bus. It could be solved by encryption of the data or authentication. Now, what does authentication mean? Well, you call up the pizza delivery place and you give your order and they tell you, okay, your order is number 47. So now when the pizza delivery person comes to your apartment and they click buttons at random, right? And the right one answers it, opens the communication channel and says, "Who is this?" The pizza delivery person says, "Pizza number 47." And you say, oh, okay. And you open the door and let them in. Because now you know that there's, a relationship between that pizza and what you actually ordered. That's the authentication. Now, there's a lot of sophistication that goes into this because you could have 10 pizza delivery people show up at the same time and start randomly pushing buttons. So unless you've got some authentication procedure, there's no way of these pizza delivery people deconflicting and getting the right pizza to the right place. But that's a kind of second order problem. The real problem is that by injecting information into this wireless communication that every car has got, you can control that car, critical aspects of that car's operation, live and in person as the car goes down the road. This is similar to people breaking into a headlight and just physically connecting to the CAN bus through the CAN bus connection to the smart headlight or some other part of your vehicle. So that's what this is all about. And when we talk about that, and I had thought we would be talking about that by now, but I wanted to give that background to people as to how that works and why it's important, and also point out that nobody in the car business that I know of is putting encryption into these links or authentication into these links to make sure that the right data is being delivered at the right time to the right address. This is a vulnerability that everybody's got, and sounds like a great opportunity for a spy movie to hijack your car and during a chase and make sure that the bad guy ends up in a bad situation. But this is real. This is an exposure that we've all got that has not been fixed. So that's concludes my rant.
That's pretty good.
On the wireless.
I think it was only 7 minutes, so Anthony should be doing cartwheels.
So should you recommend that consumers go to their vehicles right now and remove their tire pressure monitoring system and prevent this? Or should they just remove their tires?
No, I don't. What I recommend is that the manufacturers recognize this risk among many other risks, particularly for self-driving vehicles, because any self-driving vehicle has that same exposure and has that same link. And it would be very easy to, for example, set up a wireless system that makes the self-driving vehicle stop in front of you, exposing the passengers to whatever threat you wish, because you then have control over the vehicle. You can open the doors, you can shut down the vehicle, you can change the address it's supposed to deliver the person to. So it's a huge exposure that can only be covered by the manufacturers, and they're not doing it today. Another thing folks don't get warned about when they use their Waymo One application.
So from the article you alluded to, I'm going to quote from it. It's an MSN article. The current regulatory landscape for vehicle cybersecurity is still evolving, with various initiatives underway to address the vulnerabilities associated with connected cars. In the United States, the NHTSA has issued guidelines for vehicle cybersecurity, encouraging manufacturers to adopt best practices to protect against better potential threats. So these guidelines, we know, have no weight behind them, and it doesn't look like anybody has made any progress towards this.
Right. And remember that these best practices are all being developed by engineers who work for the companies who have a vested interest in making sure that these standards and best practices are as loose and inconsequential as possible.
Yeah, but encrypting the signal, like, that's not complex. They don't have to use some crazy super long key to do this. That would burden.
I don't know what's required to be safe these days, but a combination of encryption and authentication using something like the MAC address of the ECU would go a long way towards doing that.
Right.
But somebody's got to do it.
Right. And until then, we just remove the tires from your car, or never mind, just walk. Everywhere you go, just walk. Before we go into recalls, hey, let's go. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety has a great article that we're linking to about the most stolen vehicles. And I was surprised because I remember back in the day, it always seemed to be like the Honda Accord or the Honda Civic was like always the top of this chart. Because I guess Chop Shots, they could get the parts turned around quickly.
There were some I think on some Japanese cars in the 90s.
Yeah, that's what
and 2000s. It was really easy to fake the key. You see a lot of filed down keys used, at least in the police videos I see. There always seems to be a guy in a stolen car with either a messed up steering column or a filed down key.
Right. But times have changed. And it's no longer the Japanese at the top of this chart. America, number one. And people are stealing a Chevy Camaro ZL1. What? Why? I mean, I guess you're doing the owners a favor, but like, why would you steal that car?
I mean, it could be that it's just, kind of like we saw, this IHS study looks at the 22 to 24 model year. So it's not going back to all the problems we've seen with Hyundai, Kia, and the stolen vehicles there. Their newer vehicles that are covered here perform great. I don't see any of them in the top 20, but there are a lot of pickup trucks. And the Camaro comes in first and third.
Right.
Apparently, I would just have to assume that there's some type of either specific demand for these vehicles on the street, or they're just for whatever reason easy to get into. In fact, you see, there's a lot of GM vehicles. I think 6 or 7 in the top 10 here, which suggests maybe they want to take a look at their security. A lot of people love, Ford's not in the top 20,
which is surprising. The F-150 is the number one selling car, right?
Yeah.
Or truck, right? A ridiculous amount of them, but
it's kind of dominated by GMs and a few Chrysler vehicles scattered in too.
It could be the thieves are like, I don't want to have to deal with recalls after I steal this car. Yeah. Maybe that's why I leave Fords alone.
Also, the 4 out of the top 5 least stolen vehicles are Teslas, which means even thieves don't want them anymore.
All right.
If you steal a car, are you still able to get your car serviced and recalls?
Yeah, I would assume if you walked it into a dealership and said, "I need to have this recall fixed," they might do it, even if you're not the owner. I'm not. I guess it would depend on the dealership. I don't know if I can't recall. At the Volkswagen dealer when I bring my car in for repairs or recall, I don't recall them IDing me, so they have really no way to identify who I am. So I assume you could. I don't know. As a thief, I don't know. There's two. I don't know if you can fit that in the same person. Someone who is both a car thief and concerned about recalls.
Well, Anthony, that's great news for you and your Maserati.
Hey, it's just my neighbor's Maserati. I'm just holding on the keys for him, and it's good. Hey, listeners, if you've stolen a car and tried to get it recalled, let us know about it. Save your bail money. Just hang out. You get 3 hots and a cot, and donate. Autosafety.org. Click on donate. And with that, let's go into the world of recalls. First up, Nissan. 13,719 vehicles. The 2025 Nissan Frontier. And the issue is some engine control ROM software. The body control module signal, I can't read this.
Yeah, it's much easier than how you're making it here. So the daytime running lamps on these vehicles, there's like a disruption when the stop start system comes on and essentially turns your vehicle off for a second. So not only does it interfere with your air conditioning, it might also make your daytime running lights blink immediately. Now, interestingly, daytime running lamps are not mandated to be in operation on all vehicles, but they possibly should be. I mean, I think there is a safety argument for that they would make all vehicles on the road more visible. And I believe that they're mandated in Canada, but the United States has not followed that path, and perhaps they should. But if you do install them on your vehicle, then they have to work properly. So you can't get away with a problem like this by saying, "Oh, we didn't have to have them anyway." No, once you've installed daytime running lamps on a vehicle, you have to have them work the way they're supposed to, being turned off when the stop start system kicks in. Doesn't fly. And so they're going to have to recall these. I think I'm guessing there's going to be a software update here. Yeah, they're updating the software on the engine control module. Looks like a pretty quick trip to the dealership for this one, and owners should be hearing about it in about a month.
We will never follow Canada. How dare you suggest that, Michael?
We need to follow Canada
Canada's
on some things now.
Always on top of us. It's ridiculous.
Well, we still need to catch up with them on the theft standard and on the daytime running lamps and a number of things. Go back to the episode with George Inney from 3 or 4 months ago. We got a lot to do to catch Canada. Their fatality rates have dropped in the last 10 years, while America's have leapt.
Yeah, number one. Next recall, Ford. What? How are they on this list? 103,174 vehicles. The 2025 Ford F-150, 2023 F-150s.
That's it.
The rear axle hub bolt may break due to fatigue and will no longer prevent micro movement between the hub spines and the actual shaft splines. Over time, in a corrosive environment like the road, corrosion and the micro movement may result in wearing of the hub splines, which can lead to loss of torque transfer to the wheel end.
And what does that mean?
Good at all. I just said words. I don't even know what any of them mean. What is it?
Ultimately, the concern here is that if your rear axle hub splines are stripped, you can have problems with the vehicle rolling away while it's in park because the transmission can't hold it in park. It also looks like it can cause a loss of motive power. So you're going to stop moving when you're not in four-wheel drive, which
you're going to be in a world of hurt. This is called fretting corrosion. And if you're
named after you, fretting corrosion.
I wish, but no, it's just called, and it's caused by small vibrations. If you may have seen this on a door hinge, little black powder on the outside of the door hinge from the moving back and forth. That's called fretting corrosion.
Well, anyway, last recall coming up. Tesla, 5 vehicles. What? 5
Yeah, we had a slow week this week, so I picked that one.
Weird. This is the 2026 Tesla Model Y. Oh, I understand. It was because only 5 of them have been sold because no one wants to buy a Nazi mobile. There we go. An inoperable horn may increase the risk of collision. That sucks.
Yeah, and it looks like they're blaming it on the supplier here. They didn't secure the ring terminal of the horn ground wire, and that results in a loss of continuity in the horn circuit. But basically, you won't have a horn if there's a problem here. And the crazy thing about this recall to me was that owners, you're going to hear about it later in September. It's not going to be an over-the-air recall either. It's a physical part. That's a problem. But you would think they would go in and ground the horn wire. That's the problem here, the horn ground wire. But what they're doing is just replacing the entire steering wheel. So you get a new steering wheel.
That's great. And when you come in, they'll finish your swastika tattoo.
Excellent.
It's great. And with that, folks, that's another episode of Your Life. I hope you feel educated, improved, relaxed, serene.
Well, thanks for listening, folks. I don't have the same aspirations, but thank you very much for listening.
All right, that's Fretting Corrosion saying goodbye.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.